what Trump has done is irreversible. There's still a fantasy that somehow everything can go back to normal. The market soared way up. It's as if they're whistling in the dark. Trump won't chicken out. He'll just say that he's winning everything, and he'll say one thing and do another thing. So whatever he says isn't that important. What really surprised me when the stock market began to soar, when he said we're going to have a meeting with China, soared just thinking there would be a positive meeting. And then on Monday and Tuesday, again, the market soared way up, and it's as if they're whistling in the dark. They're hoping that somehow you can roll everything back the way it was before, and you can just reverse things, and there's going to be normal trade with China. This amazes me. I think that what Trump has done is irreversible. There's no way he can go back. He's declared war on the whole rest of the world, and he's said repeatedly that the next 3 months, while he's negotiating with other countries on a country-by-country basis, he will agree to lower the American tariffs on Asian countries, Latin America, Africa, if they refuse to trade with China and if they impose sanctions on trading with China. So the whole exercise of what pretends to be a tariff act is really a preparation for total economic war with China. That's what he wants. It's obvious that what China has agreed upon has no intention of letting America build up its inventories of the national security elements, the rare earths, the terbium, all the products that America wants from China. All of that trade is permanently stopped. And I don't see this time China resuming it. In fact, 15 years ago, when China put blocks on its exports to Japan of rare earths, they got around it in various ways. Miners apparently sold much of the ore to Japan, third countries did. My guess is that China this time is going to tighten up all of the export controls that it did before, much more. And there's an intention of absolute cutoff of trade between China and the US. American companies in China are busy moving everything they can out to India, Vietnam, or other countries away from China. And China, for its part, is already shifting its trade away. Soybeans to Brazil, away from the U.S. So I think the Chinese people, certain officials, certainly read the American statements week after week that China is our number one enemy. We will go to military war with it next year or in 2027. There's all the preparation for all-out war over Taiwan. That's why Trump is trying to make this rather silly settlement with Russia now, saying, all right, the Americans are going to pull out of Ukraine support. We won't do it. It's up to now Germany, England, and France to put NATO troops in and start basically refight World War II. Trump says we want to keep our troops and our military to fight China, not that. And I think that if the Western Europeans actually try to move peacekeepers, meaning terrorists and saboteurs and fighters, into Ukraine on their way to Russia, Russia is going to escalate the war very sharply against them. And China is very polite internationally. It's saying, yes, we all want peace. Maybe we can go back to normal relations, but there will never be normal relations again. Trump has tried to isolate China and Russia with all of these sanctions, and what he's done is create a backlash. And he's isolated the United States from these countries instead. That's the effect of all of this. And the stock market doesn't seem to have realized this. There's still a fantasy that somehow everything can go back to normal, but there's going to be a new kind of a normal, and it's not going to be like it was before. He's already said he's not going to follow through. It's he announced these huge tariffs just to frighten people and say, "Oh my heavens, we're going to be destabilized. What are we going to do?" And Trump is meeting with each of them individually and saying, "We're not going to destabilize you. Just fight China, and we'll lower the tariffs to 10%. You have to give it, and let us take over key industries and do other things that we're asking for." But suppose you're right. Suppose that Trump really were to keep the tariffs up on other countries. The first biggest effect would be that these countries would run a very large trade deficit and balance of payments deficit by losing the American market. That's what Trump is threatening against them. They actually have a very good response, at least one that I've been trying to promote, and that is if we are locked out from exporting to the American market, then we cannot earn the dollars that we need to pay the dollar debts. We are now suspending debt service on all dollar debts because it's the obligation of the American economy nominates the debts in dollars to enable us to earn the dollars to pay the creditors. And if we can't earn the dollars to pay the bondholders, then they won't get paid. My principle is a debt that can't be paid won't be paid, and the global South countries cannot pay their debts if they lose the American market. So here's a perfect opportunity for them to suspend dollar debt payment without any intention of ever resuming it. In other words, a debt cancellation. In order to do this, they would have obviously the United States will retaliate to them and say, "Well, we'll wreck now that you've lost the U.S. market to wreck your exports. Now we'll call the International Monetary Fund on you, and we will destabilize your financial economy." The global South countries will have to create an alternative international bank to the International Monetary Fund and say we're withdrawing from the IMF and from the World Bank, and we're creating our own international banks whose purpose is not that of the United States in 1945 that created the IMF and World Bank to promote American exports, but a global South, global majority bank to promote trade and investment between them. This would essentially break the global majority away from the U.S. as a result of Trump. I think that's where it's moving. There's no other direction for it to move in, but it surprises me that the BRICS countries have not already moved more quickly to create a whole set of alternative institutions to the IMF, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, and ultimately to the United Nations itself, representing themselves. They cannot possibly create an economic environment in their own benefit as long as the United States has veto power over all of these institutions. And the U.S. has veto power and IMF, World Bank, United Nations, and it's paralyzed the World Trade Organization by refusing to appoint a judge, which is needed for the quorum. So there needs to be a discussion about what are these alternative organizations going to look like. I don't see any discussion yet. So I see some period of anarchy. And the United States is going to try to pick off the most heavily indebted countries and use international law to grab their assets abroad, grab their gold supplies, if they've kept them in the United States and Britain, the United States is going to treat all the global South countries and the BRICS countries and even wealthier Asian countries in the same way they've treated Venezuela. Seize their assets abroad, including their gold. You need unity, saying we cannot remain in the American-centered system. We cannot remain in the dollarized system because we'll go bankrupt. We cannot afford to spend our government income on infrastructure, on protecting our industry, on economic growth, if we have to pay the dollarized debts that we have. We have to break and become economically independent. And the United States, through the IMF and the World Bank, and the whole world order that it designed in 1945 was designed to prevent us from being self-reliant. So we all agree we have to be self-reliant. Before I said countries don't want to break. A country is not the government. The problem, the United States says, we don't care what the country of Germany feels, even if the German people don't want to go to war in Ukraine. All we need is a corrupt, rotten leader like the Merz, the one they have. And if we have the leaders and the heads of the European Union foreign policy, von der Leyen and Kaya Kallas, representing pro-American, anti-European policies, then it doesn't matter what the countries and the people want. You have the governments controlled directly by the United States. So the government is not the people, just like the United States put all of these dictators and regime change people and the Boris Yeltsins of the world in charge of foreign countries. They didn't represent the people. The United States is trying to corrupt the governments of these countries, as it's done for years under the National Endowment for Democracy and all of this regime change and covert operations, all backed up by terrorism of Al Qaeda and so like al-Jilani, the terrorist in Syria, with whom Donald Trump shook his hand and seemed to be quite happy with. So I think there has to be something like in the United States, it was called the Great Awakening in the 19th century. It was a religious movement to saying there has to be another way of organizing society. That's what you need for the third world. But they don't have their own ideologues yet. They don't have leaders like they had before. And it's as if there's a kind of paralysis. And I think all of this is catalyzing some kind of self-determination, some kind of pressure to design a new world economic order. But the discussions of this new world economic order, I think, were more advanced in 1954 and again in the 1970s than they were today. That's rather surprising because the one thing that other countries have today that they did not have in the past was a critical mass. They couldn't go it alone in the 50s or the 70s or even the 1990s or a decade ago because they didn't have a wide enough range of economic production and foreign exchange reserves to actually become a critical mass. They do now, and that's largely because of China and because of its socialist economy, showing how rapidly countries can develop if they don't have a financial oligarchy blocking them. That means that China and other East Asian countries and Russia have to take the lead in all of this. And I'm waiting to see how they're going to do it. I mean, that's why we're talking on this show. This is what Kinsey's group has been trying to do for a long time. How do we describe the kind of world that we want to bring into being?